Nicole
Thank you.
Battaglioli, ER.org.
And I'm Alvarez, I'm the Director of Wellbeing at Stanford.
So, we have no financial disclosures, but if you'd like to offer us any, we could be more
That seems to be
willing
the
to.
line this year.
Yeah.
Offering any?
I wish I did, you know,
I wish, yes. Well, that's just because we're asked to do a lot of things.
and no one's paid me to do it.
Yeah. Come on in, welcome. Whether you're in the right place or not, you're now part of the team.
What did you hope to learn about?
Data sources and numbers. Oh, that's what
We are not data source.
Yeah.
We are about
They have
inclusion.
data
Inclusion
sources.
and assimilation.
Yes, that's
All
us.
right, now I am in the right place.
Yay.
Yeah.
Well, welcome.
So as Aaron just pointed out, we're talking about inclusion and not assimilation today. The big thing is, you know, DEI, we talk a lot about diversity, bringing people to the table, getting their foot in the door, how to fix leaky pipelines and do all these things, but it's more than just bringing people in who are diverse. How do you make them feel included? How do you create an environment where you can keep them, retain them, where they can excel? So this is probably, if I could pick one slide to just be like, this is the top, it's this 2x2 square, where we really kind of break down the differences between what is differentiation, what is assimilation, what is inclusion, what does that actually mean in exclusion? And it's kind of the, come on in. Oh, and it's the, when you compare level of belongingness that someone feels to their organization versus their uniqueness and what they bring to the table and how that's embraced in the organization. So assimilation, right, you kind of think, you know, you move somewhere new, or you often talk about assimilation in the sense of like immigrants or other people who have gone outside of their normal culture, but you feel kind of forced to assimilate. Their uniqueness is not really valued, but they want to have a high sense of belongingness to their new culture, new place. Differentiation, low level of belongingness, uniqueness is highly valued. So that's where we like bring people in, because we value them for maybe some sort of diversity factor that they have. But we don't actually make them feel like they belong to the organization. And then the happy place being inclusion, where you bring people with diverse backgrounds and things in, and then you actually truly value that, and you give them a sense of belonging.
I would just add, I think that in the context of the work that we've done, many of the spaces that we've been asked to do or we have participated, we've actually just been asked to fit in. And fitting in, including when we look at like ranking of residents or recruiting, we're asking the question like, do they fit in? Which implies really like, can they assimilate? Which then gets you, before they even get to the door, you're asking them to change already, which is not belonging.
Now, are those things unique? Are they like uniquely together, or are they opposites?
Which one?
I mean, just saying you want to include somebody because you want them to belong, but that doesn't exclude their uniqueness. I mean, it sounded almost like you were saying that there is an exclusionary issue there.
Sometimes, right? So you can have, so I've been a diversity hire before, right? Where I was basically told to my face, like, well, we needed to bring another woman on, so we hired you. So great, I'm here, so that's my uniqueness, is that I have a vagina. And then once I got into the door, they're kind of like, yeah, but we don't actually treat women equitably in terms of like their voices being heard. And so that's the belongingness, right? So I had the uniqueness factor. And if you go, yeah, so that's where you have at the bottom. Uniqueness is highly valued. Thank you. I needed to meet sort of like a quota for diversity in the department. Thank you for coming. But please just like kind of keep it down. So that's where you get kind of the differentiation. So, but if you bring somebody in and you're like, yes, welcome to my department.
Thank you.
You're cool. I like you. You fit diversity. Great. But I'm actually going to listen to what you have to say. I'm going to consider your cultural background. I am
All the intersectionalities of my identities, the lived experiences I've had, and for me to just show up as me, as opposed to trying to fit in, like how can I fit in the context of what is expected of me to do, which can actually be stifling from a creative perspective.
Yeah, that's kind of where you're like, okay, now we're really getting after true inclusion, right?
Yes.
You can show up with your authentic self and kind of be you, more than just the like check boxes you might bring to the table.
So in essence, what we're highlighting here is that belonging is really being able to own your own uniqueness. So belonging is being able to ask for that music that you want to be played at the dance and even knowing how to dance as opposed to just being invited.
So, and then when you look at exclusion and inclusion, we've got some nice spaces here, but the gray zone is actually this assimilation and this differentiation where you might think you have inclusion, but it's kind of a pseudo-inclusion, right? So the one example of myself I brought up being differentiation, then assimilation being, we want you to feel like you belong here, but in order to do so, you need to kind of tamper down some aspect of your intersectionality, some aspect of your uniqueness.
In some ways, very often, what happens is like, yes, great, you're a diversity hire, and then you show up and you don't belong. And so the most likely event is you're going to hate the place, you're going to leave, you're going to trash the place because they have never really shown the effort that you're part of their family.
I'm sorry if I asked too many questions.
No, like it.
Tokenism,
Yeah, so let's talk about it now,
so you
right?
don't belong, but your uniqueness is highly valued. Those
Right.
two seem to be contradictory.
How so?
Is it?
So,
Yeah. Well, then you're about her.
so you're hired because you fit in the,
Check box.
your token
Right,
is
you're a
what you
woman,
bring, you're
and-
a woman.
But at the same
But
time.
then you have to like water down the certain aspects of how you normally behave or carry yourself because you're surrounded by men or,
Not persons of color or different cultures or belief systems,
But
so.
being a woman, you're highly valued. But your belongingness is not there.
Oh, okay. I see.
You're valued because you complete a demographic.
so you're not
Right.
valued as a person.
The
but, like,
uniqueness is just that you've been put in there.
Right, yeah.
Not because, well, see, I read uniqueness and I think, oh, it's because of what you're doing. But that's not unique.
But I like that though, because what you're implying as well, perhaps, is that there are things that you were born to, and there are also things that you're accomplished, that you've accomplished or experienced. But for the purposes of our discussion here, the uniqueness encompasses all of that, right? Can you show up, bring all of the things that you were born with, the resources, the privileges that you got, or not, and still be you, and still be valued, and still feel like you belong with that group?
But to your point, your uniqueness could be, oh, great, you're a meta educator and we need to fill, that's the checkbox. We're hiring for a specific role, right? So inherently, you're right, something that you do or might not be kind of your uniqueness. But then once you get there, do you get to bring the rest of the parts with you, right? You're more than just, the ultrasound director. You're also a mom and you're a son and, you're a person of color and you're this and you like to wear jigs on shift and and how to do all these things. Like, do you get to bring those things with you? Or is the organization kind of like, no, we just really need you to kind of like just do this?
Just fit in. So that's the assimilation. If you don't even fit in, then you're just a token.
So if I understand tokenism correctly, some things that might have occurred adjacent to or in my orbit are when a certain demographic is highly represented on an interview day, you ping the two residents that are also from that demographic and say, you have to come to this day for the lunch with the applicants because we really want them to see you.
Yeah, that's,
For the
there's this like,
visibility of it,
yeah.
we lump that into also like the minority tax, right, which will, we'll get to that, yeah.
I love only questions because it actually sets us up
And
to
it's
get in
nice
there
for, like,
and also allows us to finish the 20 minutes.
And-
That's learner-centered as opposed to just us with
And
our
then,
slides.
let's see.
Yeah. I think we talked about this, but that's good. So what are the benefits of inclusion? Like, this is actually borne out in a lot of times, like the business literature, like, you know, if I think the apparently, you're like, oh, that makes sense. Like, what's the value of a diverse committee or a diverse organization for the individual? If you've got a diverse and an inclusive environment, the benefits are that you've got an environment of psychological safety, right? You're going to decrease a lot of interpersonal conflict. The people are more likely, when you can bring yourself to your job, you're probably going to be happier, more engaged, less burnout, all that kind of stuff. So your organization is going to be better. You as an individual are going to be happier because when you go to work, you don't feel like you need to leave part of you at the door when you walk in. And then, again, borne out a lot in the business literature, inclusive and diverse organizations, they tend to make better decisions overall. They're usually more financially successful, better cohesion, higher performance, all these things, right? Because you're allowing everybody in their background and the experiences that they have to actually be able to contribute that to the group work that you're doing. Whereas, if you have a very homogenous kind of population or committee, there's definitely just going to be things that you don't think about, perspectives that you don't have. So we'll kind of talk about, these are some standard ways, or we could have this more as a discussion, but like, to you guys, what are ways that your organization can increase the inclusivity of whether it's your department, your organization as a whole, meaning like hospital level, small committee you're on? You're like, how do you laugh? Because you probably have a lot of ideas.
So I'm the only Latino doctor in my need to be the only Latino hospital in Quebec. I speak Spanish at least 50%. Not at least, around 45 to 50% of my patients speak Spanish.
So this is perfect.
I cannot form a committee
Yeah.
or a group because it's me,
Yeah.
and now we have one resident.
So this is perfect though. How often do you get pulled from whatever you're doing?
All the time.
To speak Spanish?
100%.
For a patient that's
I volunteered myself.
minority tax, right? She's doing extra work. You volunteered your time. She's
So
doing
not paid.
extra work.
Well, not extra hours, but
But extra cognitive work.
extra cognitive load, and
Well, you get
but also like worrying for the patient because I know that they're not gonna understand with the translator. I know that the 93-year-old
Yeah,
lady is
Yeah.
not gonna
yeah.
talk to the monitor.
Which in essence takes you away from all the other work that you want to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Because then,
And then I didn't look at that EKG or something.
that's right. That's right. And if you screw up, then why did you do this?
So things that kind of come there, hiring more people, but your organization actually has to show that they value this as a construct, right? They could say like diversity is important, but again, they have to show value and express that they are invested in what happens to people once they get into the work.
Having those meaningful changes in place other than just putting in the vision value statement and not really having anything that you can see.
Right, so, having inclusive practices and policies, like how do you support people with various religious backgrounds? How do you support women who are having kids, women who are not having kids, men that are having kids? Like, how do you support families? How do you support all of these things, right? So actually implementing policies that are more supportive than exclusionary.
And again, adding this concept of intersectionalities, we have different identities that we're carrying. You're not just one. We're a combination or a accumulation of all the experiences that we have, in addition to what we're born with.
Engaging diverse perspectives, meaning that like when you go to make decisions, that you're getting perspectives from all of the stakeholders, no matter who they are, what they look like, what their background is.
And allowing for those constructive conflict to even have a discussion when perspectives vary, right? And welcoming that in order for us to have a better chance of innovation, a better chance of making something work as opposed to listening to just one person saying like, this is their idea, and that should be the final it.
So I kind of mentioned this, right, like how do you show that your values are in line with respecting people's various backgrounds, whether they be religious, cultural, sex-based, like all those kinds of aspects of intersectionality that was on that other slide.
And being intentional about just giving education and awareness, calling out the data, like being the only one. I don't know how much more data can just show that, right? But beyond that, like maybe looking at like how many people applied in a year and how many do we consider, how many do we offer to interview, right? Just trying to get them in. But then looking at the rank list. Are we truly like valuing what we're saying here, or are we just doing some checklist to say that we did the efforts, and then most of the candidates actually fall at the bottom of the pile, right? That is not using diversity as excellence. It's using diversity as a checklist to get all the other things that we want to do to address the JEDI requirements or whatever else requirements that we're expected to do. It's totally.
So you might, I don't know if many of you are aware of these papers, but they actually looked at, like how do some of our biases with how we treat people in different groups, how do they permeate into like resident education, right? And there was a great study where they looked at resident evaluations for male and female emergency medicine residents, and they found that on average, the scores of the female residents lag behind in their milestones by 6 months. Now, you can't convince me that all of the female residents are 6 months worse than all of their male counterparts. It's because there's a lot of inherent biases in how we evaluate people of different groups and classes, right? And if we're not educating ourselves on what our biases are, if we're not educating our other, evaluations teams about like how that process is done, and if we're not creating ways to give feedback that we try to strip from the biases, then we just keep kind of perpetuating this environment that's actually not that inclusive, because those people end up feeling like they don't belong because they feel like they're worse than the people around them.
The long run can also look like we're actually measuring the progress where we're going here as opposed to just talking about it.
Now, I'm presuming that the first study on that list, that they just accepted the milestones as what they were given by the assessors who are
Yeah, the
there.
residents did.
Right.
Right.
So
The first
the
and the third year
residents were
residents.
assessed by the attendings, and the
Right.
attendings milestones were accepted as being legitimate.
True, right, because you don't, until you kind of, start comparing notes or whatever, right? It's not like you have access to all your cohort scores as well, and you're like, hey, what's up here? But you have to be intentional about asking the questions to look for what the problem might be. But you're right, they just kind of accept it because they're like, well, I guess I'm bad.
So any intrinsic biases might not be noticed, and the results then just accepted as the type
And
of
that's
assessment.
exactly what the study showed.
Right, but was there any way for them to determine where those biases were and whether they existed? I naturally assume they did, but how they occurred and where they were.
They looked at all the milestones, not just procedurally, but also like how they can manage the route.
All 20, whatever,
23, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and there's some other literature to show that if you teach your faculty about these studies, or you even remind them before they fill out an evaluation that these biases exist, and you provide faculty development on how to interpret the rubric, so that they understand how to use the evaluation tool, you will have less bias. But reminding people that they're biased, this is not a value judgment. You're biased, you're human.
I have bias. Everybody here
We
is
all
biased.
have bias. It's not like, oh, this person is unbiased and this person is heavily biased. We all have our biases, so reminding folks to be thoughtful about it before they even make a decision is an important part of the process that we can do at an institutional level.
So then the question on the study is, did they do a program like that before before asking for the milestone?
No, this is just.
This is just to
It's
highlight that
like
there
we're
is
all
a
looking at
difference.
it. And then once they identified things, then they started to look into okay, what kind of interventions decrease the likelihood of this happening.
And
And
they
in this
really-
first paper, it was just a raw look
Just a
at.
raw look at it.
Yeah.
And they did also the analysis of what people are writing about it. So there's some themes as well that they got. But it also gets us to the conversation here, which is we need to create spaces and forums to discuss this. Because if you're the end of one, like how do you, like where do you go, right? So you expand that space, like maybe for the entire GME, maybe for the entire school of medicine, and also here at the national level, right? Because it is very hard to be the only one. And we also know that visibility helps with encouraging more people to look into the program and say like, oh, maybe I can see myself being that as well.
I mean, it sounds like that would be an interesting study to measure milestones at one point in time and then do
And
the
then have us do it
intervention.
again, you know.
Do it at the point, or even do it across multiple
Right.
centers.
Yeah.
I like that. SAEM is education and research, so yes, yes, yes. I understand that we are at time, so we can continue doing this, but I think the next speaker is here. And so we're just gonna get to a little bit of the validations of that people experience, the micro insults, things that prevent you from feeling included, the micro invalidation, things that's just kind of gaslighting your experiences, right? The assault, the micro assaults that you experience on a day-to-day basis, the gossips, the rumors, the teasing, and being able to call out, even education-wise, like how do you call out all these microaggressions? And so our ask for you, because this is not going to be effective if we're just going to be talking here and get inspired, but text yourself, what's one thing that you can do to improve institutional inclusion? Because I can guarantee you, each and every one of us has the capacity to actually make some changes here. So please do that. And thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I was thinking about this for much longer than 20 minutes.
Yeah.